Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel for another video. Now, as promised, this week's video is a true crime video. But before we get started, I hope you notice a difference in quality. My new equipment arrived and I'm really excited about it and I'm really happy with it. But anyway, on with today's case. This case is one that has divided people and still divides people today. Some people believe that the guilty party is actually innocent and she was framed. And some people believe that she went out of her way to poison her victim. This is the attempted murder of Dr. George Blumenschein. And the guilty party in question is Ana Maria Gonzalez. How did Ana Maria Gonzalez, a dedicated breast cancer nurse who had saved the lives of many women, become an attempted murderer? Today's video will be talking about the events that led up to the attempted murder and the preceding court case and investigation after this. The following clip is of Dr. Ana Maria Gonzalez talking about her breast cancer research when she worked with a breast cancer research charity. I'm not going to post the full clip. I will put the link to the full video in the description box below and if you're interested in seeing that. But this is just a short clip that I took from that video.
Usually a typical day, I leave my house between 6:15 and 6:30 and get to the hospital about 10-15 minutes later and do some office work, meaning signatures and cleaning email for an hour or so. And then if it's Monday, I go to clinic. Deep breath. Out.
It was at the MD Anderson Center where she worked her way up to be the Associate Professor of Medicine. It was also at the MD Anderson Center that she met and began working with Dr. George Blumenschein. The pair worked on a cancer research project together and would spend upwards of 60 hours together per week minimum just working on this paper, and in this time they became extremely close. Dr. George Blumenschein is a professor of medicine in the head and neck oncology department. He received his BA from the Vanderbilt University and his medical degree from the University of Texas. He mainly focuses on creating drug treatments for cancers, particularly those of the lung, head. He met his longtime girlfriend, Yvette Tony, while the pair worked together at the MD Anderson Center. She was an epidemiologist, she was highly educated, and the pair had a lot in common, and they soon began a relationship. In 2007, Yvette landed her dream job working at a pharmaceutical company, and the pair moved in together. In 2012, despite their age of being in their 40s, they decided to try for a baby. They had to use IVF because of their ages. It wasn't easy for them to both conceive, but eventually they became pregnant. Unfortunately, Yvette would lose the child and would suffer a miscarriage. On the 27th of January 2013 at almost midnight, George is rushed into the ER, clinging for life. He has liver failure, he has kidney failure, his organs are all beginning to shut down, and doctors are completely baffled at what is causing these symptoms. They run every test under the sun, they tested for a stroke, hereditary diseases, and nothing returns up anything. Doctors are also very confused because when George arrives at the ER, he is slurring his words and he's not making any sense, and they don't really know who he is. That is until Yvette and Ana Maria rush in about 5-10 minutes later and explain to the doctors what has been happening. Lab work showed unusually high levels of acid in his blood that was causing the kidney damage. Doctors believed he was going to die, and so they put him in intensive care and put him on dialysis to remove potentially harmful toxins from his blood. It's the next day when a nurse goes to change his toilet bag, she notices a crystal-like substance in his urine, and so they take it to a kidney specialist to be analysed. The specialist was shocked to discover that the sediment in Dr. Blumenschein's urine was actually calcium oxalate crystals. Sorry, I had to look at my notes there to get that right. Dr. Blumenschein had been poisoned. Now, he'd been poisoned with a substance called ethylene glycol, which is most commonly used in antifreeze for cars. This is a type of alcohol, but is very, very dangerous. Even in the smallest doses, it can cause long-term damage and even death. I'm just going to apologise in advance if I look at my notes for a few of these things. There's a lot of technical terms and medical terms, so I want to be able to get this right. So if I look at my notes, it's because I want to get all this stuff accurate. Now, ethylene glycol poisoning, early symptoms of this include vomiting, intoxication, and severe stomach pains. As the poison develops, symptoms can include losing consciousness, headaches, and seizures. This can then lead to kidney and organ failure, and in some severe cases can cause death. Ethylene glycol is a sweet, colourless, odourless liquid. It's been used for years in poisonings as it's quite sweet, and a lot of people wouldn't detect this as a poisoning taste. Because of this discovery, police are contacted, and Detective Mac Sosa is the first on the scene. He couldn't interview George due to his condition, and so he tries to get a picture of the events leading up to this poisoning and who might have possibly poisoned him and how he might have ingested the poison in the first place. He begins by talking to George Blumenschein's longtime girlfriend, Yvette Tony, who is initially very open with the police and tries to help them put together a timeline. She tells the detective that the two had shared a takeaway the night before and a bottle of wine. George had been at a medical conference, and when he had got home, the two had ordered a takeaway from a local Greek restaurant, so it was quickly ruled out that this Greek restaurant had obviously not been the reason that George had ingested this poison. They also ruled out the bottle of wine because Yvette had also had some wine and she was showing no symptoms of ethylene glycol poisoning. The next morning he left for work despite it being a weekend, and he drank a glass of orange juice before leaving. As I mentioned before, George and Anna had been spending a lot of time together working on a research project and had become very close. On the day of the poisoning, Yvette knew something wasn't right when she called George later on in the day after he left for work. He was slurring his words and he wasn't making any sense, and even he knew that something wasn't right with him. She begged him to go to the doctor, but he said that he would be okay, and she grew increasingly concerned when she continued to call him throughout the day, but her calls weren't answered. That evening he had gone for a meal with several physicians, including Ana Maria. Around 10 p.m, after no word from George, Yvette, who is stricken with worry, decides to call Ana Maria. Ana Maria says that she thinks everything is fine, but that George is acting slightly weird. So Yvette says to Anna, "Why haven't you taken him to the doctors?" And Anna replies, "Well, he's uncontrollable, I can't get him to do anything." And Yvette says to Anna, "Stay right where you are, I'm on my way. Make sure you look after him, I'm going to take him to the ER." But when she arrives, George has already left, and when she confronts Anna, Anna says she couldn't stop him, he just got in his car and left. And bear in mind at this moment in time just how intoxicated George will have been because of how long the poison had been in his system, and she knew what she had done to him, so she let him drink drive essentially. So after this, both women rush to the hospital where they find George sat outside on a bench, and they both try to convince him to go into the ER, but he is still refusing. So Yvette begins to record him to show him just how bad he is with his slurring. So if I can find a clip, I'm going to insert a clip here of just how bad Dr. George Blumenschein was with his slurring.
Here he is. Yes, you do. You do need somebody.
I didn't know if we had a wheelchair.
George.
Josiah.
How you doing, sir? How are you? I'm fine. I think you're fine. Just give me sure. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. A little bit. Sure.
So eventually they contact paramedics who come and speak to George and tell him that he needs to go and be seen immediately. So they convince him to come with them. He's trying to say that he just needs to get hydrated, but the paramedics know very, very different. So they take him off in the ambulance, and Yvette and Anna rush behind after him. The substance that was used to poison Dr. George Blumenschein, as I mentioned earlier, ethylene glycol, is usually used in antifreeze. However, in this case it was used in its purest form. The only way that you can get ethylene glycol in its purest form is in a lab, and Dr. George Blumenschein didn't work in a lab, so there's no way that he could have somehow accidentally ingested this poison. He was also a clever man. There's no way that he wouldn't have taken, if you know what I mean, like he wouldn't have taken this without realising. So that meant that it had to be somebody that had access to the labs and access to this substance. And so they originally looked at the theory that possibly somebody had tried to poison him and kill him so they could take credit for his research and his work. Suspicions originally start to turn to a vet when, after initial questioning, she suddenly gets an attorney and stops being cooperative with the police, and Detective Maxosa said this is where she severely hindered the investigation. They don't know whether, at this point, they didn't know whether she was doing it to protect herself or whether she was doing it to protect George as well. With the reluctancies of both parties with speaking to the police, the detectives turned to George's colleagues to get more of an idea of the situation that might have led up to his poisoning. Detectives spoke to colleagues who described Dr. George Blumenschein as a well-respected member of the workforce with a secret. He was having an affair with Dr. Ana Maria Gonzalo. Ana Maria Gonzalo had come a long way from her humble beginnings, where her and her family lived on a farm producing cattle and coffee. She had decided to go and study medicine as several family members had suffered from cancer. She was a world-renowned cancer doctor. She had saved the lives of many women, and a lot of her patients said that they felt like they were in safe hands with her, that she was a very good physician. After arriving at the hospital in 2003, her and Blumenschein began working on a research project together where they became extremely close. A co-worker had described an awkward moment where one time he had walked in on the pair and Anna was sat on George's lap. He called Anna his little princess, and like I say, it takes two to tango. I am in no way saying that this was just Anna's fault. Of course, the affair was both parties' fault. It takes two to tango. The pair are spending most of their time together inside and outside of work. They're travelling to work conferences and research places together, and they were in Colombia on a business trip just before this happened. One source, or several sources, even claim that on one of these trips, George actually met Anna's parents. Hi guys, it's me again, looking slightly different. So I made the rookie mistake of starting to edit the footage without checking that the whole thing had recorded. So I spent about a week editing to realise I only had some of the footage that I needed, so I'm back recording the footage that's missed out from the original recordings, so apologies for that. But without further ado, let's get on with the rest of the case. So rumours begun to fly at the hospital. Everyone was talking about George and Anna. Allegedly, she was very flirty and she didn't stop talking about George. Every conversation she brought George up. So detectives finally get to sit down with Anna and they want to get an idea of the timeline of the day that George was poisoned. They want to know if the pair had eaten or drunk anything together. Now, the only damning piece of evidence that she tells the police is about the coffee that she had given George on the morning of his poisoning. However, this is what she had told the doctors at the emergency room. Detectives found it very odd, the lack of upset that Anna showed at a colleague that had been poisoned and was potentially dying. She didn't show any emotion at all, which they would have expected considering how close the pair apparently were. Now, Anna denies any knowledge of an affair. She says that her and George are extremely close, that they're very good friends, and yes, they have been spending a lot of time together, but they're just friends, nothing else is going on. She also tells detectives that she is well aware of the rumours that go around the hospital and it's caused her a lot of trouble. When police quiz her on this, she tells them that she's been receiving threatening texts, calls and emails telling her to stay away from George. She tells detectives of a particular time where she was allegedly assaulted outside of her home, and during this assault she was told to keep away from George. So she tells them after this assault that she calls George, and he and Yvette insist that Ana come to stay with them for a while so that she is safe. She also tells police that apparently the pair told Ana to go to the police about this assault, but she put it off and put it off. The police now believe that she fabricated this assault and that she had either wounded herself or faked these injuries because of the different rate of bruising that each bruising was at. They expected that if she had been assaulted like she told police, that the bruising would be at the same coloration, but it wasn't. Detectives now believe that Ana was trying to subtly blame Yvette for the attack on her, and that was her way of trying to get rid of Yvette. Eventually, George was given the news that he would survive the poisoning, and when he woke up from his coma, he made a hospital bed confession to Yvette all about the affair with Ana. He insists that they never fully went all the way, all that happened was oral, and because he didn't want to fully cheat. When he was recovered, the lead detective on the case took George for a drive in an unmarked police car to try and kind of make him feel a little bit more comfortable, like there was no one around watching him what he was saying. And this is where the detective asked George about the timeline of his day, about what he had eaten, what he had drunk, and that sort of thing. So George confirms this timeline. He also confirms the affair, which Ana, we know, had already denied. And he tells detectives that Yvette had no clue what was going on until he made his confession in the hospital. So he insists that Yvette never would have tried to have hurt him, and he is really worried that it was Ana that had tried to hurt him. He also tells detectives that after Yvette had lost a child, that strangely Ana had offered to be a surrogate before she had said anything else. He also confirmed that the affair began in 2011 at a medical conference in Sweden, and it had been Ana's idea, and Ana had instigated the whole affair. Again, like I say, it takes two to tango. I know that she may have instigated it, but he still went along with it. George Blumenschein told detectives that on the day of his poisoning, he drove to pick Ana up, and the plan was that they would go back to the office, to the hospital, to do some more research. However, when he arrived at Ana's, she had allegedly dragged him in through the door and they engaged in sexual activity in the bedroom. Afterwards, Ana cooked him some breakfast and she gave him a coffee that was unusually sweet. Now, Ana and George worked together a lot. As I've mentioned, they spent 60 plus hours a week together. She knew how he took his coffee, but this one tasted like it had lots of sugar in. So George took a couple of sips and then he said to Ana, "I'm really sorry, I can't drink this, it's too sweet." However, she insisted that he drunk it. She told him that it was a special home blend that she had got from her homeland and that she really, really wanted him to have it, and he didn't want to be rude, so he continued drinking it. She even took a flask of this special coffee to work with them so that George continued drinking it throughout the day, and he did note the extreme sweetness in this. Obviously, as I mentioned before, ethylene glycol has a very, very, very sweet taste. Now, when detectives asked George about the wine that he and Yvette had had the night before, he said he didn't kind of detect the sweetness in that wine. And so luckily they'd saved the wine bottle that the two had shared the night before, and they tested it, and there was no traces of ethylene glycol in the wine. Detectives now believe that Ana snapped when she realised that George would never leave Yvette to be with her, and she had the mentality of, well, if I can't have him, no one can. And so they believed that she poisoned him. However, they now needed to prove this. They said that the coffee fit in the timeline like a glove. So the crystals found in his urine fit in the timeline. If he had been poisoned earlier than when Ana had given him the coffee, the crystals would have disappeared. She hadn't left enough time for the crystals to go. If these crystals weren't found, they never would have known he was poisoned, and if she'd left it a little bit longer, they never would have known this. On the 29th of May 2014, Ana is arrested as she's leaving her door to go to work. So she tells detectives, "You've got the wrong person," and according to the detective, he said to her, "You can't argue with science, can you?" And she replied, "No, you can't." So she's arrested for aggravated assault. Now you might be wondering why aggravated assault, and we'll get to this in a minute, but yes, she was arrested for aggravated assault over attempted murder. On the 15th of September 2014, the trial begins and the prosecutors decide to try her on aggravated assault because it carries the same level of punishment as attempted murder and it's much easier to prove. George is grilled about the affair on the stand and he tells the jury that he regrets it deeply. He says that it's really hard for him to relive the moments leading up to his poisoning because he almost died. He had never done drugs, however, he told the courtroom that on the evening that all of him and his colleagues went for a meal, a colleague asked him if he had been taking narcotics. He also told the courtroom that he wanted them to find out that it wasn't who he thought it was that had poisoned him. So he also testified that he had secretly recorded conversations between him and Ana because after the poisoning he feared for his and his girlfriend's life. So the following clips are actual recordings of conversations between Ana and George.
I'm not a crazy person. We were friends. I feel pretty used and I feel completely betrayed. Why in Christ will I ever hurt you? Why?
Why would Yvette hurt me?
I don't know. I don't know you two. I would have run away a long time. But, you know, I mean, it's different. I mean, you seem to know things better. You seem to know her better.
So in another clip that I've not included here, she later goes on to tell George that she has enough circumstantial evidence to press charges against Yvette. The defence claimed that Blumenschein had exaggerated the affair, that Ana wasn't that into it as he thought that she was. They also claimed that it wasn't her that had poisoned Blumenschein, someone else must have poisoned him, she had simply just put sweeteners into his coffee. Yvette Toney provided the prosecution with the testimony that they needed. She took the stand and the following is actual court footage.
I felt so stupid. I mean, I trusted her, I trusted him. I felt stupid. I was there for 3 weeks and I kept thinking to myself, you're gonna make me look like a complete idiot. No one said anything to me about this. It was more than anger. I felt betrayed. I was kind of lost in a way.
We're still working on our relationship. It's a work in progress. So we're working on things.
Yvette goes on to tell the court that George had told her, "Yvette, do not poke the dragon," after this because he was so scared of Ana after the assault. The state claimed that Ana fabricated the assault on herself and that the toxicology reports proved that she was the only one that could have poisoned George because of the crystals in his urine and the time that they take to pass through and then not be in the urine anymore. The defence argued that ingestion of any harmful substances could have happened a day or even days before the symptoms begin to show. They also claimed that the affair wasn't as dramatic as they're making it out to be and that it's a dramatic case. They also pointed out the apparent holes in the investigation, the lack of due diligence and the lack of interviews with other potential suspects and witnesses. However, the state claimed that this was Ana's way of trying to win George back or trying to save the day. She could rush in and save him from this poisoning. I'm not entirely sure about that one. This is just what the detectives have since said since the case. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury of 7 women and 4 men found Ana guilty of aggravated assault. The prosecution asked for a longer prison time than usually would be given because of the amount of years that she had taken from George's life. The prosecutor then told the court, "It doesn't matter who you are, it's what you do." Many of her patients still believe in her innocence and still vouch for her to this day. In fact, one of her patients testified in court, and I'm just going to read from my notes here so I get the exact quote right. She testified, "She saved my life and the lives of so many others. It was heartbreaking for me to see her placed in custody and taken to jail. She doesn't deserve it." Prosecutors argued that society should be more angry with the fact that she had taken herself away from all those patients that she could have helped and she could have done great things for. And I agree with this. This is the most tragic thing about this case. A man has had his life cut short, yes, but the amount of lives that she could have helped to save or better, or the amount of research that she could have done towards cancer, we'll never get to know what she could have done now. Ana Maria Gonzalez-Angulo was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and she cried in court for her friends and family. Now we're just going to talk about the effect that this has had on George Blumenschein's life. So doctors now say that his kidney functions at 43% of its full capacity, and he has several years cut off his life. He says he plans to spend the next few years building a home for Yvette and any future family, because he knows he won't be around to see the future. So before this poisoning, George and Yvette were big foodies. They'd go out to restaurants all the time, but now George is on a very, very strict vegetarian diet. He can't go out and eat in restaurants because there's so much that he can't eat, otherwise he'll become seriously ill again. He can have strictly no salt and no alcohol, and every day is just a blessing for him now, because he doesn't know when his life's going to turn, if there's something that's going to make him ill again. So that concludes today's case. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think she was innocent? Do you think the right person was convicted? As I mentioned before, I think the most tragic thing about this case is that she took herself away from all of those patients she could have helped. She was world renowned, her research was changing lives, and now we'll never get to know how that would have changed the world, and especially research around breast cancer. So I think that's the most sad thing about this as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. So I've got around a week off at Christmas, so I'm hoping to get a couple more videos uploaded than I normally would, because obviously I'm not going to be working all day. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and give this video a like, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, guys.